Remember the Ellen DeGeneres show?
Well, yes.
When Ellen came out,
Yes.
and she was out, and I definitely noticed that. I don't know if the commercials, but Subaru, obviously, as speaking of cars, since we're at the car show, the Subaru car company noticed at some point that there were a lot of lesbians who were buying their cars. And to their credit, they decided to go with it, to increase their outreach and their visibility in that community and say, yeah, sure, we can be the lesbian car company. And as far as I can tell, hasn't hurt their sales with anybody else. They still have a good car.
And they haven't gone out of business.
They have not gone out of business, no.
They have not. I actually see that as a positive thing because it's not like the LGBT community is something new. It has been here throughout history as we have all been educated on these issues.
Right.
Some of my all-time heroes, James Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, were members of the LGBT community.
Right.
I didn't know it at the time, but it didn't diminish their work, and it didn't diminish my thoughts about them. And so, I guess I'm actually asking you to talk a little bit about the history that this has been a part of this country since we've had a country.
For sure, and part of natural, human history.
Yes.
We haven't always had these words for them, right? We've always, I think, of course, the biological drive to reproduce has kind of made it default or assume that eventually a man and a woman were going to, pair up and produce some offspring, because at our base, we are animals, and we want our species to survive.
Yeah.
So even, I think, there are absolutely, in recorded history, people who lived and loved people of their same sex, even at the same time they might have maintained a relationship with someone of the opposite sex, or they might have just been, single folks that just never, lived in a society where it wasn't acknowledged, but they had someone close in their life, but no one gave it a name, or perceived what it really was. So, yeah, it's always been a part of human history. And
which makes me ask the question, if this has always been with us, just like heterosexual relationships have always been with us, where did the taboo come from? Is that a result of the church? Is that a result of social taboos? I mean, do you know much about how we got to the point where there was serious persecution?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to point it back to the church. Now, churches have always, and religions have often been very interested in regulating sexual behavior, period, and encouraging kind of these family construction that creates more offspring. So beyond just, rules about homosexuality, of course, the church is really invested in controlling women's bodies and, telling people how
Although we've since learned that they were very much invested in homosexuality, too.
Right, but not, in a healthy way, not in a good way.
Not in a healthy way, exactly.
Right, when you don't admit it, if you're not, comfortable, you don't accept the full expression of human sexuality, then and it becomes repressed, and it comes out. It's going to come out anyway. It either comes out in a healthy way or unhealthy way. So
do
I think
we
it's the repression.
I know we don't have the levels we used to have, Steph, but do we still have levels of oppression, of bigotry against the LGBT community across this country to the point where it can be dangerous?
Well, it's absolutely still dangerous, particularly for trans women of color. We should just highlight the high rates of violence that trans women of color suffer from day in and day out. There was a trans woman here in Detroit who was shot 4 times just before the holiday in November. And she survived. She was in the hospital for a while, and she's since been sent home, but she's still trying to recuperate. And, trans women of color absolutely, much more vulnerable to violence and discrimination.
What was the circumstance? Did somebody just see her, recognize her, or thought she was something they didn't like and just shoot her, or what?
She was just walking down the street, and people started harassing her, and then they shot her. I don't know the whole backstory of what happened in that case. I just know that it happens quite frequently. Actually, so far this year, in 2018, there are already a handful of trans women of color have been killed around the country. Trans people have been killed across the country. So every year, there's a very small percentage of the population overall is trans. But the rates of violence are off the scales. There were probably, how many last year? I want to say 26 people around the country who were killed, more than one a month. just for being trans, just for having these, lives that people get discriminated against. They can't stay in school, they can't maintain jobs, and they can't maintain housing. They end up living on the margins in dangerous, you know, uh, dangerous circumstances that put them at risk.
Right. Let me jump in here just for a second because I think we need to promote your show. Tell us a little bit about your show.
Sure. So Curtis Lipscomb from LGBT Detroit is my partner in crime. Every Monday night, The Agenda is on 9:10 a.m. Monday nights, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we talk about these issues, and we talk about the whole spectrum of LGBT life in Michigan. We just had Kevin Terrell Hurd, who's the head of the Detroit LGBT Chamber of Commerce, was on with us last Monday.
I didn't know there was an LGBT Chamber of Commerce.
There is. They promote LGBT-owned businesses, help them get certified as LGBT-owned so they can qualify for contracts and network and grow our economic capacity. So, there's economic aspects of LGBT life, just like the advertising we started talking about. Then there's the social aspects of life and safety and advocacy. I run Equality Michigan, right? So we fight for equality under the law. We try to, advocate for laws that keep us all equal.
Now, that's another question. Tell me about Equality Michigan. I didn't know that you ran that.
Yeah, so Equality Michigan has been around under different names for over 20 years. Triangle Foundation was our predecessor.
I remember that.
Yeah, Jeff Montgomery, a longtime executive director and one of the founders, just passed away 2 summers ago.
I knew Jeff. I used to interview him.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he just passed away 2 summers ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was a loss, definitely. But the organization that he started and the work that he got going so well continues on. So that's a good legacy for him. So we have 2 arms. We do victim services, where if you are an LGBT person who's been a victim of crime or harassment, you can call us. Our Department of Victim Services will be your support and help you get connected.
And then you'll send out a squad to beat somebody up?
I wish.
Doesn't work that way, huh?
I wish. Trust me. We'd love to, but might lose our grants. Might lose our funding for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you need a lawyer that you're attacked on, we can help you get connected to a lawyer, a doctor, whatever you need. And then the other part of our work is the advocacy. So not a lot of people realize here in Michigan, if you are gay or transgender, you can be denied apartment. You can be kicked out of a restaurant, denied service somewhere. You can be fired from your job or not hired simply for being gay or trans.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
A landlord or a property manager can tell you up front,
Yep.
I don't like your sexual orientation. I'm not renting to you.
Yes.
And that's not against the law.
In most of Michigan, that is not against the law, unfortunately. Yeah. Now, Detroit has a non-discrimination ordinance, so if that happens to you, and it does happen here in Detroit, there's a mechanism set up where you can take it to the Civil Rights Commission and say, hey, this happened, and I want you to investigate, etc.
Right.
But it's not the same as having a state law that says this is illegal. Detroit as a city, and Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids and all the big cities basically have these.
Right.
But downriver, there's a trans woman we've been helping who was trying to rent an apartment or rent someone's trailer home or something. Some have a place to live. She didn't have a lot of money. She got bounced out of 3 different locations.
Wow.
And people wouldn't rent to her, or once she rented, then they found out who she was, and then they kicked her out. And unfortunately, the law, there's nothing she can do about that.
So is Equality Michigan pursuing a legislative agenda? Are there bills that you're trying to get passed, or have any been introduced?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act is our state non-discrimination law, right? It covers race and religion and national origin and all these characteristics that we all agree, you shouldn't be discriminated against. But it doesn't include sexual orientation or gender identity. So we have a bill that has been introduced. State Rep John Hoadley and State Senator Rebecca Warren each introduced bills in the Senate and the House to try to update that law and bring it into, 2017, 2018, and Adam. That hasn't gone anywhere because we still need some more Republican support in order to move it, but we've done that.
One of the things, and I will pepper you with questions forever, so you can say stop it please if you want to. But one of the things that I have heard and actually been involved in debates about is there a parallel between the fight for LGBT rights
Hmm.
and, let's say, civil rights,
Yeah.
or black rights, or
Sure.
Latino rights.
Sure.
I have heard folks who are
Yeah.
black or Latino
Right.
say, look, that's their fight, this is our fight, they're two
Right.
separate things.
Right.
And I've also heard black folks, Latino folks, LGBT folks
Right.
say, no.
Right.
When you go through the surface, we're all talking about the same thing,
Yep.
and that is discrimination.
Right on. Yeah, well, the NAACP is strongly pro-LGBT, anti-discrimination. So, there's a old civil rights organization that understands it. Of course, neither community, you can't say all people of color or all gay folks, are monolithic. We don't all have the same opinions. Unfortunately, the LGBT community is full of racism, as, its share of racism and own issues. But absolutely, if you think about it, at the core, and actually, you know what? The easiest way to tell that we are really intimately intertwined is to look at who fights against us.
Mm-hmm.
People who fight against racial civil rights are also tend to be against gay civil rights.
Right.
We share a common enemy.
They lump us all
They
together.
lump us all together.
Yes.
You are different, therefore we don't like you.
Yes.
You know.
Not only different, you are inferior.
You are, yeah. Well,
You're not
for
as
sure.
good as we are.
You're not as good as us. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how you know our struggles are absolutely late.
How does one become a member of Equality?
Yeah, you can absolutely make a donation to our organization. We have both a C3 and a C4, and our C4 is just launching a new membership program this year. So make a donation to, for folks who don't know, the C3 is all like tax-free donations. The C4 is our political arm where we get to hit on some lawmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So make a donation to Equality Michigan Action Network, and you can be counted as a member.
Interesting.
EqualityMI.org.
Good. I want to remind folks that we are broadcasting live from the 2018 North American International Auto Show. I am here with Steph White. She hosts the show, The Agenda.
The Agenda. That's
On
right.
9, 10 a.m. I think you said it's every Monday evening, right?
Every Monday evening, 8 to 9.
8 to 9, and you definitely want to check that out, especially if you have any interest or concern about LGBT issues at all. And she's just a good person, so you want to hear her on the air. Anyway, you can call into the show if you'd like. The number is 313-778-7600. That is 313-778-7600. What are some of the particular problems that young people in the LGBT community face? Because I just most recently, Steph, read an article about suicide rates among young people. And I was shocked how many young people that have committed suicide or attempted to commit suicide have done so because they were a lesbian or they were gay and they had a family that ostracized them.
Right.
They were in a school where they were afraid to come out. It led to a lot of depression and other things.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, if you just look at homelessness among youth homeless rates, okay? All of the homeless kids in America, 40% of them tend to be LGBT. 40% of all the kids who are homeless
Really?
are gay or trans. And that's, much higher than the general population. Just so folks know, what percentage of the general population is gay or trans, it's hard to really estimate, but our best guess is maybe 4%.
4%.
4%. So
So if
4%,
well, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
yeah, so 40% is 10 times as